Good morning. I call this meeting of the Senate Communications and Technology Committee to order, and I'd like to welcome back our members, welcome our new members, and welcome our new Minority Chair, Senator John Kane. It's great to have you on board and looking forward to getting some good things done this session. Rob, if you could please call the roll.
Almond, here. Brooks,
Personal leave.
Dush, Kane, here. Mensch, here. Sabatina,
Here.
here. Saval, here. Stefano,
Proxy.
proxy. Williams Anthony H,
Here.
here. Phillips-Hill,
Here.
here. Corman,
Proxy.
proxy.
We have a proxy for Senator Dush as well. Thank you, Rob. We've established a quorum, and we have two bills on our agenda. The two bills that we will be considering today are all essential to the deployment of high-speed broadband internet throughout the Commonwealth and part of the comprehensive package of broadband-related legislation that we started working on last session. Today's meeting is the culmination of several public hearings this committee held last session on how we can close our digital divide. However, more recently, we have all heard of the many challenges that our constituents have faced and will continue to face with remote working and learning. The bills on this agenda, combined with the legislation that we passed last session, are just the start of a multifaceted approach to closing our Commonwealth's digital divide. Now, more than ever, when our state and our nation are learning and working from home, we must make broadband accessible to all Pennsylvanians. I would first like to call up Senate Bill 341, a bill that I have sponsored. Senate Bill 341 is now before the committee. This legislation would modernize and streamline Pennsylvania's regulations that apply to our landline telephone companies. And many of the regulations which exist in our public utility code have been in place for decades, while at the same time we have seen sweeping changes to the technology and communications landscape, making these costly requirements unnecessary. This bill would permanently waive regulations from 52 PA Code Chapter 53, Sections 53.57 to 60, which are tariff filing requirements for incumbent local exchange carriers. Section 53.85, which regulates paper billing fees, and all of Chapter 63 and 64, which deal with telephone standards of billing practices for telephone services. The Commission would retain oversight as it pertains to customer complaints, 911, relay service, slamming and cramming, and universal service. The Commission would also be required to review its telecommunications regulations every 3 years and eliminate all regulations that are no longer necessary or in the public interest. It's interesting to note it's been well over 20 years since they have taken a look at these regulations. Pennsylvania's landline telephone companies represent less than 10% of voice subscriptions in the state and are subject to a strict regulatory framework. This puts them at a competitive disadvantage and diverts valuable resources away from critical investments such as broadband deployment. I want to be very clear. Senate Bill 341 is not full deregulation. Again, I will say it. Senate Bill 341 is not full deregulation. The obligations to provide voice service, rate regulation, and other quality of service metrics are all accounted for within this bill. This legislation takes a critical step forward in modernizing this decades-old archaic regulatory framework, which is no longer applicable in today's competitive environment. Is there a motion to move the bill? Senator Almond, is there a second? Senator Mensch, is there any discussion on the bill? Senator Kane.
I'm sorry, no assumptions on the rule, but I would like to have a word to say before we vote on it.
I welcome your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to take a minute to thank the Chairwoman Phillips-Hill for her partnership and leadership on this committee over the past few months. She has made me feel welcome here in the Senate, and I enjoy working with you, so thank you there. I will vote no on Senate Bill 341, and I wanted to highlight a few reasons. I am concerned with several provisions in Senate Bill 341, including reduced oversight, accountability, and consumer protection for telecommunication providers. Both the AARP and the Office of Consumer Advocates have identified risks to consumer protection with this bill. Additionally, this bill would preempt the work that the Public Utility Commission has already begun to modernize these regulations. Currently, the PUC is working on developing new regulations with input from stakeholders. The PUC published notice of proposed rulemaking on April the 10th, 2021, in the Pennsylvania Bulletin, and comments are due by May 25th, 2021. Madam Chair, we should let the PUC finish a process that they have started and has given voice to many stakeholders, including the Office of Consumer Advocacy, the CWA, and the IBEW, who represents the majority of unionized telecom workers in Pennsylvania. These groups currently have a seat at the table, a seat that they will lose if the regulations are repealed altogether through legislation. So I urge a no vote on Senate Bill 341 so that we can let the PUC finish the job that they have started, a job that will ensure all stakeholders have a seat at the table and the ability to have their voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kane. I'd like to recognize Senator Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I acknowledge that there are certainly substantive concerns that my colleague of the Democratic side has indicated, and I fully am concerned about those same issues as well. But I also am concerned about the competitive balance that has been delayed for about 3 years now. Certainly the PUC has acknowledged this as an issue. It's been almost over 3 years now that they've not moved to reconcile these concerns. And while they're not moving quickly enough, the reality is that commerce continues and we remain as a state at a competitive disadvantage. And they began to move, frankly, after this bill was introduced. So it cannot indicate how I will vote upon final passage, but I would certainly like to continue to move the bill forward so that the PUC can recognize we need to move swiftly and decisively with regard to this area of protecting consumers, but also allowing antiquated and outdated regulations to be removed from the books so that Pennsylvania can compete in this space. And for those reasons, I will be voting for the bill with the consideration and hopefully the opportunity to talk to all parties concerned. And frankly, I've not talked to labor at all. I look forward to those visits and anyone else who want to make sure that I'm concerned about consumer protections. But I will vote for the bill to allow it to move out of committee and looking forward to a conversation before it votes on the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Williams. And Senator Williams, I too look forward to having those conversations. And protecting our consumers is paramount, and we'll look forward to us all working together. While this bill, I think, is a good product, that doesn't mean there is not room for improvement, and welcome those conversations. If I could just reiterate that we are not eliminating voice service. We are not eliminating consumer protection or any mechanism for a consumer to file a complaint, and would like to please remind everyone that phone service is still much more regulated under this legislation than cell phone service. And if I could, speaking to the modernization of Pennsylvania's telecom regulations, they were originally proposed by the PUC in 2015. 3 years later, in 2018, the PUC opened a rulemaking process with no specific changes. They were only seeking input from stakeholders. And at the time, traditional landlines had less than 12% of all the voice subscriptions in our Commonwealth. After waiting 5 years in April 2020 without any action, We now see that this service takes up 9% of the marketplace. We need to address this. We know as a result of the pandemic how absolutely essential it is for individuals to be connected to high-speed internet. And I do believe that this bill is a critical step forward, and again would remind everyone that 91% of the marketplace is not under these regulations. Certainly would ask for an affirmative vote. Rob, if you could please call the roll.
Almond. Aye. Dush. Aye. Kane. No. Mensch. Aye. Sabatina.
No.
No. Saval. No. Stefano.
Proxy, aye.
Proxy, aye. Williams Anthony H.
Aye.
Aye. Phillips-Hill.
Aye.
Aye. Corman.
Proxy, aye.
Proxy, aye.
Senate Bill 341 is reported as committed by a vote of 7-3. Next, I would like to call up Senate Bill 442, which is another piece of legislation that I have sponsored. Senate Bill 442 is now before the committee. Senate Bill 442 would direct the Department of General Services to conduct an inventory of all department, agency, commission, or institution-owned communication towers, poles, buildings, and facilities to leverage existing state-owned assets for the provisioning of high-speed broadband internet to unserved and underserved areas. This legislation would also pull a new state grant revenue gained from a 20-year, $100 million contract that this administration has entered into, which inserted a third-party middleman to negotiate the lease of state-owned assets to deploy broadband. The Commonwealth is the largest landowner with large swaths of state parks and forest land throughout the areas that lack access to high-speed internet. If we can market assets owned by the state to broadband providers, we can help Pennsylvanians frustrated with no access to high-speed internet. If a major carrier wants to give the state a large amount of money to put up a tower in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, then that money can be repurposed to build out broadband infrastructure throughout the rural and unserved portions of our state. This bill will help us know what opportunities currently exist for the state to be a key partner in closing the digital divide. Is there a motion to move the bill? Senator Dush, is there a second? Senator Ament, is there any discussion on the bill? Senator Kane.
Madam Chair, I rise to oppose Senate Bill 442. And I want to be clear. The goal of this bill is good, and we need real solutions to expand and improve broadband access to underserved and unserved areas, especially in our rural communities. But Senate Bill 442, as currently written, I am not sure that it gets us to that point. The Department of General Services opposes this bill for several reasons. One, they have already completed an inventory of assets, making this part of this bill redundant. Further, DGS supports Commonwealth efforts to expand and improve broadband capacity and allows communication providers to co-locate on Commonwealth property at fair market rates to allow for increased broadband expansion. Finally, the restricted account raises concerns for state agencies who receive compensation for the lease of their assets. The CWA and the IBEW also oppose this bill. They have concerns whether this bill will help the bottom line of telecom companies and ignore underserved and unserved areas of the Commonwealth, or will this bill help deploy broadband to areas of the Commonwealth that have been neglected since the 1990s during telecom deregulation? This issue is important to all of us, and I hope to work with Chairwoman Phillips-Hill to address stakeholders' concerns with this bill and try to find solutions to ensure broadband access for all underserved Pennsylvanians. But in its current form, I will be voting no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I agree totally with my chairman with regard to the concerns as raised. I also realize that many parts of Pennsylvania are not served, and that hurts our economy, hurts our communities, it hurts many young people who frankly don't see an option as many others in other places that are well served by broadband. And just on a lighter note, just be very clear that while I'm not concluded on my final vote, I will support this bill going out of committee. But be reminded that an urban member voted for the bill for a personal part of Pennsylvania that he does not reside in. I don't hunt, so I don't travel there much, but I acknowledge that they're part of Pennsylvania just as much as Philadelphia is part of Pennsylvania. So thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman from Philadelphia, and would say that we recognize that there are unserved and underserved people all across this Commonwealth, some of whom reside in the city of Philadelphia, and that is, of course, an interest of this committee, and we look forward to moving legislation to address broadband deserts in some of the most populated areas of our Commonwealth in the future. And I appreciate the comments from the gentleman from Philadelphia. And if I could say, a vote against this measure maintains the status quo. And the status quo is such that we have a significant 20-year, $100 million contract where resources that were at one point promised to further deploy broadband are now going back into general fund spending. If we truly want to close the digital divide in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, then we must make sure that those resources that were talked about are actually allocated to that purpose. And would say to the good gentleman from Delaware County, my door is open. I appreciate your input and want to make this the best bill possible and look forward to continuing the conversation. Respectfully ask for an affirmative vote. Rob, if you could please call the roll.
Almond. Aye. Dush. Aye. Kane. No. Mensch. Aye. Sabatina.
No.
No. Saval. No. Stefano.
Proxy, aye.
Proxy, aye. Williams Anthony H.
Aye.
Aye. Phillips-Hill.
Aye.
Aye. Corman.
Proxy, aye.
Proxy, aye.
Senate Bill 442 is reported as committed by a vote of 7-3. I want to thank everyone for their attendance here today. I now recess the Senate Communications and Technology Committee to the call of the chair.